just wanted to let you know before we get going in the sermon this morning, some of you may not have been able to be here last week to go back and take a tour of the education wing that we're building. If you'd like to go look and see what those facilities are looking like after the service today, Charles has let me know if you go through the center classroom in the fellowship hall, you can go right down that hall and look and see how everything is. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful space. And I'll remind you, the plan is, as we're getting right to open that, we're also going to be taking those classrooms out of the fellowship hall, so the fellowship hall will be quite a bit larger. That's going to be wonderful, isn't it?
Amen.
So I just encourage you to go take a look at that if you haven't already. Do you know, or did you know, that idolatry is a major issue in the Bible? Idolatry is the worship of someone or something other than God as if they were God. The command against idolatry is one of the most, if not the most, often repeated commandment in Scripture. At least 50 of the laws in the first 5 books of the Bible deal with this issue of idolatry. And worshiping idols is one of 4 reasons God gives in the law under the Old Covenant for the death penalty. It's a big deal. Everywhere you look in the Old Testament, you find people building idols and worshiping them. We got golden calves, and we got Asherah poles and statues, and worshiping false gods at stone altars on mountaintops and making sacrifices to them. Idolatry was a major problem way back in the day. And it's still a problem today in this world. I mean, I've heard a lot of missionaries talk about these tribes in the jungles of Africa or in South America where they have all these idols, all these little statues, and they make all these sacrifices. But is idolatry only a problem in those remote places? I really shouldn't have been surprised as I was. Back in 2000, little old country Chris, grew up in eastern North Carolina, got on a plane and left the country for the first time, went to South Korea where I would be stationed for an adventure of a lifetime for 1 year. It was a wonderful experience, although I missed my young new bride. It was a wonderful experience. But we sat down at the airport there in the southern tip of the peninsula, and then I rode a bus up north, heading up all the way to almost to the DMZ. So it was several hours on this bus, and I was fascinated. My eyes were glued out the window because of all these sights I was seeing on the other side of the planet. And they had cars and motorcycles and cell phones, and they had cities and towns and villages, and so there was a lot of stuff like us, but it wasn't, if you understand what I'm saying. Those of you who traveled in other countries probably would say the same thing, especially if you've been in Asia. And as I'm going along, looking at all these sights, I'm starting to feel very lonely. But then I see a bunch of, as it's getting darker outside, I see dotting the landscape across these towns and these villages and these cities, red neon crosses. And everywhere there's a church, they put up those neon red crosses so that you know where the church is. So I thought, I've got brothers and sisters over here in another part of the world. Wonderful. Started feeling better. But you know what else I saw? A lot of temples. South Korea, over the course of months that I was there, South Korea's got a ton of Buddhist temples, and they're beautiful structures. Matter of fact, there was one, and we left our post, and we hiked about an hour over the mountain. There was a Buddhist temple up there in the middle of nowhere. The only way to get there was to walk up this mountain path, all right? And it was beautiful. But as I saw and looked around this country and saw all these temples, and I saw these Buddhist statues, and I saw other kinds of statues and idols from other religions where they would come and pray, and they would make sacrifices, leave offerings. And it began to be a burden on my heart that even in the first world, even in a country much like ours, they're worshiping idols. They need Jesus. Amen. It hurt my heart. It troubled me. But then it hit me that idols aren't just a problem for Old Testament, and they're not just for jungle tribes. Idols are first world problems. Even people who believe in Jesus, even people who call themselves Christians, idols aren't just a problem for pagans. Brian Bill was a minister he and his wife served as longtime missionaries in Mexico for several years. And there's a large Catholic presence in Mexico. And he writes, "We were amazed and grieved by all the attention given to the Virgin Mary depicted on statues and paintings. In early December each year, hundreds of thousands make pilgrimages to the Basilica in Mexico City from all over the country, many of whom crawl on their knees." He says, "Beth and I, his wife, have been to this shrine to Mary on several occasions and observed people climbing the rough cement stairs on their knees, leaving bloodstains behind. Worshippers couldn't wait to get inside to kneel before the supposed image of the Lady of Guadalupe printed on a cloak." Idols. Idols are everywhere. Even in America and even in the church and even in my life, in your life, idols. Because anything can become an idol if you lift it up to worship it. So most idols aren't made of stone in temples. Over the next few weeks, several weeks, we're going to take a hard look at idolatry and what that looks like in our lives. Ed Stetzer wrote an article a couple years ago entitled "Smashing the Idols." In it he says, you probably don't have a carved stone statue in your house, and you've never traveled to Asia and purchased a totem or some other representation of a false god. So why a conversation about idolatry? Why would that be an important thing to you? Well, believe it or not, the most common warning about sin in Scripture does not deal with lying, gossip, adultery, stealing, or murder. The most common sin in all of Scripture that we're told to avoid, reject, and move away from is idolatry. And that's not just a sheer of holes in the Old Testament. In fact, in the New Testament, 1 John 5:21 says, "Little children, guard yourselves from idols." We make idols for ourselves when we lift up anything before God. Anything. Money, comfort, sex, control, self, family. And many times, the things that we lift up as idols are good things that God has given us, blessings in our life. I like the way Mark Driscoll says it. He says, what happens is we take good things and we make them into God things. And in so doing, they become bad things. As we try to wrap our minds around the sin of idolatry in our lives, let's lay the right foundation. There is only one God, but we are constantly tempted to worship idols. This temptation to idolatry is addressed in the first two of God's big 10 commandments, right? The first two commandments tell us who to worship and how to worship. The first one, who to worship. Exodus chapter 20. Let's look there in Exodus chapter 20. And verse 3. "You shall have no other gods before me." How many? How many come before him? None. And the thing is, he's not just saying, listen, there's not going to be any God that's competing with me for first place and then they get first and I get second. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, there is no other God. None. You will not have any other. I will not be in a competition for your heart. There is no competition. I don't come in first place. I don't even come in a distant first place. And second place is way back there. He says, there is no other God. I'm the only one. I'm the only one who will worship. The second commandment tells us how to worship. Look at verse 4. "You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, on the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing loving kindness to thousands to those who love me and keep my commandments." No idols. You don't create anything. You don't lift anything up to worship. Nothing. Nothing. And when we put other people or other things ahead of God, that's what we're doing. We're building idols. And the scary thing is, idolatry is at the heart of every other sin. Every sin that we struggle with, every temptation that pulls at us, the source is some form of idolatry. There is something in your heart or your mind that you are putting into competition for first place. And And God says he's what kind of God? A jealous God. He's not going to be in a competition. God wants all of your heart. It's all or nothing with him. Not just you coming to church and singing some songs and giving some money when the plate goes around and enduring a long, boring sermon. That is not what God wants from you. He wants your heart. All of it. There's a time Jesus is addressing the Pharisees who know the law and they work hard to keep all the rules. They're going to church a whole lot. They're keeping all the church rules kind of thing, you know. And he says, they're hypocrites. Why? Well, he quotes the prophet Isaiah in Matthew 15, verse 8. He says, this people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far away from me. He wants your heart. Because if he has your heart, guess what? Everything else will follow. And just 10 verses later, in Matthew 15, 18, he says, but the things that proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and those defile the man. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, slander. The temptations, the struggles of our lives start right in here. The question is, who or what has your heart? What is your God? What is the idol you worship? Idolatry is the trunk of a tree, and all of our sins spring from it because we put other people and things ahead of God. And we're never going to get stronger. We're never going to defeat those temptations and struggles in our lives if we don't recognize the source of the problem. We got to smash idols. If we want to remove idols from our life, we first have to identify them. What idols do we worship? Anything and anybody can become an idol. Your house could be an idol. You're totally consumed with renovations and having the nicest, perfect everything, and it's got to be like that Southern Living. That's your house, right? If that's you, maybe your house, your property is an idol. Your body could be an idol. You are obsessed with fitness and diet and exercise and your appearance, and you want to be looking a certain way, and that's what it's all about, or you're obsessed with just being healthy and being able to run 53 miles and like a bear's chasing you. Your body could be your idol. A sports team could be your idol. Go Pirates. Arg. Arg, right? And everything else gets put on hold for that game. Everything. Every single thing. Or your child's team. And whatever junior is doing, whatever sports team they're on, that's what it's all about. That's your life. Sex could be your idol. A boyfriend or a girlfriend could be your idol. Yeah, I would transparently say that at one time, Jessica was my idol. Because she was perfect. As far as I could tell, she was perfect. Right? Yeah. But really, how many of us have been in a relationship where we looked at the person that was in that relationship with us and we realized we had made an idol of them, that they were what everything in our world revolved around. Work could be an idol. Your position, your influence, your accomplishments, your work becomes your identity, it's who you are. That's what it's all about. Your family could be your idol. That is what everything is about. The most important thing in your life is your spouse, or even more commonly, your kids. And then what happens, by the way? Your kids grow up and eventually they leave, and then if you ask Randy, he'll tell you they come back. They leave. But they leave the nest, and you're left wondering, well, who am I? What am I living for? The taxi service is closed. Then you're just waiting around for grandkids. Grandkids are wonderful, but your life, your family can't be an idol. Don't make them out. Love them, support them, enjoy them, but don't make them your God. what Driscoll said, what happens when we take good things and turn them into God things, and they become bad things. How are you going to figure out what your idols are? You need to check yourself. You better check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? I ought to put that in my notes. That was good. Check yourself. Check your attitude. What is it that disappoints you? If something doesn't go the way you want it to, are you disappointed more than you should be? Well, I'll tell you, if you put all of your hope and your trust in anyone or anything other than God, what are they eventually going to do? They're going to let you down. That's just the way it is. Even if they have good intentions, even if that's a wonderful thing, it's going to let you down eventually. And if that disappointment crushes you so that you can't even go on, that may mean you've got an idol you need to deal with. What worries you? Is there someone or something that you are absolutely terrified of losing? Like you can't even hardly function. The idea of losing your job or losing that person you love. Whatever it is that keeps you up at night, you're just worried constantly about it, that could be an idol. What is it that angers you? If somebody disagrees with you, contradicts you, somebody cuts you off in traffic, does it make you so mad that you just see red? Maybe, if that's the case, if you're just easily angered, and maybe you're dealing with the oldest idol that there is, self. Yeah. So check your attitude. And check your wallet. Where's your money go? Pay attention to what you're spending on what. Guys, if you've got 237 rifles, okay? I know I'm going to meddling. I know it. I'm just saying that if you've got 50 to 5,000 guns, right? Or if you've got 86 and a half pairs of shoes, right? You could be seeing a sign that you've got an idol to deal with. If you think about it, you had to spend money to get that stuff. And how do you get money? Some of you are like, you ask your parents. No. You work. You work and you give up part of your energy, part of your time to get money so that you can get that stuff. So what you're really doing is you're sacrificing part of yourself to get that stuff. You're making a sacrifice to worship that idol. So check your wallet to see where you're investing yourself. If there are some things that seem unreasonable, it could be an idol. In Luke 12:34, Jesus says, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So we keep coming back to the heart. If you've got an idol, there's a good chance you trace a straight line from your bank account to it. Your heart is going to go where your money is. So check your wallet. And check your watch. Where are you spending your time? And who are you spending it with? Do you work all the time? I could tell you what your idol is. When you're not at work, what are you doing? Is there a hobby that takes up every minute of your day? Is there a person that you give every single moment to? You only have a limited amount of time, and Psalm 90:12 tells us that we need to number our days. Number your days. Number our days that we may present to you a heart of wisdom. So where are you spending your time? What are you doing with it? If you check your watch and see where your time is invested, that may reveal an idol. Check your phone. Check that phone. In a recent article on modern idolatry, Jeffrey Curtis Poore writes this. He says, smartphone addiction is increasingly becoming a worrying trend. This is especially true for Gen Z and millennial generations, but it's certainly not confined to them. For many, they simply cannot live without their phones or online presence. Have you ever felt that you left your phone somewhere and you left and oh no, your world's going to fall apart. You got to come back and get your phone. Some of you giggling because you done it. Okay. He writes, it's gotten so out of hand that if we are even sitting still for a few minutes, we can't help but reach to pick up our phones. Don't believe me? Go into your phone settings on screen time. You can see how many hours a day you spend looking at your phone and how many times you pick it up. If you've never done that, it's shocking. If our phones and technology aren't a modern-day idol, I don't know what is. At the heart of this problem in our phones or social media or any form of technology is the value we place on it that makes it a problem. When our lives revolve around how many likes we get, what our following looks like, or if we can't sit in silence for 5 minutes without refreshing our news feed, we might have an idol. Yeah? Check your phone. And while you're checking your phone, check your internet search history. Check the sites you visited because you might find an idol there. See, every day you must choose which God you will worship. God is the perfect gentleman. He's not going to force himself on you. He gives you the choice, the free will, to worship him or to worship somebody or something else. But if you don't worship him, understand, you will worship somebody or something. We are designed to worship. We are built to worship. Even if we don't realize that's what we're doing. We chase after. We sacrifice for. We trust. We long for something or someone, and that something or someone is our God, our idol. Moses, a right-hand man, was a guy named Joshua. And he was one of the spies who entered into the promised land to spy out what was going on. He came back, and he and one other of the 12 spies said, hey, we can go, and God's going to give us this land. It's going to be great. But the others said, no, we're scared. We're not going to go. The people sided with the no, we're scared. We're not going to go. And so the nation of Israel went on a 40-year camping trip, right? They finally get back to the land, and Joshua leads the people over the river into the promised land, and all these battles take place, and he is right there leading the way. Now, as an old man, nearing the end of his life, he gathers the people together to encourage them to stay faithful to the Lord. And in Joshua 24, verse 14, he addresses the people. He says, now therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and truth. And put away the gods, little g, which your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt. And serve the Lord. If it's disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve. Whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. It's pretty cool that he gives so many options to the people. Kyle Idleman points out that each of the options corresponds to a different time and place of life. The old gods beyond the river where you started. And then you've got the gods that they met in Egypt. And then they've got the gods of the people where they're living now. And then the other option, of course, is the one true God. And every day you and I have the same choice to make. Who will we worship? The gods of your parents? You know, your father may have worshipped the idol of success or money. And everything in his life revolved around work, and that was his identity. And maybe he didn't, and more than likely, if he had something like that going on, your family suffered for it in some way. Did you inherit that idol from him? Maybe your parents worshiped the God of family. Family time was so important, there wasn't even time to go to church sometimes. Family was before everything. Is that the idol that you worship in your family? Perhaps your parents worship the idol of you. Everything revolved around you and what you had going on. So often we follow the example that they set. And if we struggle with idols in our life, guess what? We know that our parents also struggle with idols in their life. So we've got to be careful that we don't inherit and worship the gods that they worship if they were idols. Or you could choose to worship the gods of your past. The Israelites were supposed to leave behind the gods of the Egyptians as they left Egypt and God led them through the wilderness and into the promised land. They were supposed to leave those gods behind. But what happened was some of them along the way started thinking and remembering back to those old gods that they knew in Egypt. And some of them went back to worshiping those gods. Are there some idols from your past that still hold on to your heart? Some temptations you thought you had left behind, but they keep coming back to haunt you. Ottoman says the problem isn't that we need to choose to follow Jesus. The problem is we've tried to follow him without leaving something behind. It's a good point. Because Jesus is not going to share you with an idol. Every day you choose who you're going to worship, who are you going to follow. Have you left the gods of your past behind and given yourself 100% to him? You could choose to worship the gods of our culture. The Israelites were living in a land where they were surrounded by pagans. There were idols everywhere. There were temple prostitutes in all these cities. There were Asherah poles and all kinds of evil sacrifices being made. Many of the Israelites were tempted to worship these idols. And years later, a great, or I should say a bad example of this, years later, there's this guy, the wisest guy in the whole world, named Solomon. And God had told his people, he said, you do not marry the pagan people around you. You marry within the community. And he went out and he married a whole lot of pagan wives. And guess what they did? They drove him crazy. They led his heart away from the worship only of God. Folks, we're living in a land full of idols. And the fact is that most of the time we don't even recognize the idols around us. We're just so saturated with it. It's just a part of culture. And that's what this sermon series is for, is to help us identify and remove those idols. But Paul warns us about getting too comfortable with the culture around us. In Romans 12, verse 2, he says, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. We can't allow ourselves to be molded into the shape of this world around us. We're supposed to be different, aren't we? And every day we get to choose who we're going to worship, who we're going to pursue, who we're going to sacrifice for, who we're going to trust. You have to decide whether you're going to chase what the other folks at work are chasing, what the other people in school are chasing. You have to decide, is that who you're going to be? Will you choose to worship the gods of your parents or the gods of your past or the gods of culture or the one true God? Joshua says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And that's the only answer that makes sense, because the one true God is the one who called Abram, Father Abraham. The one true God is the one who got them to Egypt, where they would be saved from the famine, the starvation that was going around. It was the one God who led them out of slavery, got them out and led them with the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire through the wilderness and led them and gave them manna from heaven to eat. And when they got tired of the bread, they wanted to whine about it. He said, okay, do you like chicken? And he sent quail into the camp, and then they could eat quail, and it was all wonderful. And they complained, and he said, I'm going to make you sick on quail. You get to give them all that food. That God, the God who delivered them into the promised land and drove their enemies out before them. And so only a fool would choose to worship a different God. Let me ask you, what God will you choose to worship each day? And there's only one answer that makes sense. What have the other gods done for you? If your parents worshiped false gods, again, it probably messed your family up. Y'all had some kind of dysfunction because people had priorities out of place. What about the gods of your past? Before Jesus? What have they done for you? Those gods enslaved you to sin. And they left you always hungry and never satisfied. Why go back to them? What have the gods of this culture done for you lately? Everybody is chasing 5 minutes of fame. Everybody wants to be a social justice warrior or a green energy person or a racist, or they're chasing money, or they're binge watching this show and that show. And social media is everything we live for. We are the most advanced society in history, and yet we are the most medicated for depression and anxiety. We have mental health problems. Something is not working, folks. Could it be that we live in a culture that's worshiping idols? And we're getting caught up in it. We need to smash those idols and worship the one true God. Because what has God done for you? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Isn't he worthy? Isn't he worthy of all of your heart? You may wonder why we started off the year talking about idols. Well, it's a new year and everybody wants a new beginning. And Athens Chapel is a place of second chances and new beginnings. We want revival in our hearts. We want revival in this church. We want fresh life. And if you look at the Old Testament, the curious thing about it is if you look at the cycle of what the people of God went through, there were always these seasons when they would go down and down and down, and then there would be a revival. There would be a judge that came along. There would be a prophet that came along. There would be a king that came along. And there was revival in the land, and God worked in mighty ways, and it was wonderful. It was a time of refreshing. But if you look at all of those times of revival, there's something, a common thread that weaves through all of them. They all begin with the tearing down of idols. Revival always begins with the tearing down of idols. And if we want 2023 to be a year of revival and growth, it's got to start with us identifying and tearing down the idols. That's what God's calling us to do. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we are so thankful for your goodness, your patience with us. We're so thankful for your heart that would pursue us, to pursue a relationship with us. You went even to the cross. You suffered and you died so that we could be forgiven for our sins. That's how much you love us. You gave all of yourself for us. It's our prayer right now, Lord, that you would help us to give all of ourselves to you. We ask you, Lord, to reveal to us if there's an idol in our lives, if there's some hidden idol we're worshiping in our heart. We pray that you would reveal that to us. Help us to recognize it, and then give us the strength that we need and the guidance that we need to cast down and smash that idol so that we choose you every single day as the one true God that we worship. Pray in Jesus' name. Everybody say amen. We're going to stand right now and sing a hymn of decision. If you have been chasing some idol that you need to cast down, maybe today what the Lord's putting on your heart is you need to come forward and confess that you've been worshiping some idol and you want to cast that down and recommit yourself to Jesus and Jesus alone. If you want to come forward to that publicly and ask for prayer for that, you certainly can. That's what the Lord puts on your heart to do. Friend, if you've never accepted Jesus as your Savior, if you have never been baptized in his name, you are in your sins. And whether you believe it or not, you are hellbound. And I would encourage you to think long and hard about where you are with Jesus. He died to save you. And he is the one true God. If you believe that today, you need to accept him as your Savior. You need to be baptized in his name and have your sins washed away. And then you need to hold on tight to him and love him the rest of your life. Won't you make that decision as we sing?